Oh. Hello, Noah. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Good morning. How are you doing, Moses?
I'm doing well as well, brother. So, I just want to ask you a couple of questions, if that's okay with you, on how you got your start on your business, on your lifestyle. Is that all good?
100%. I am just super excited to be here. I am glad that you asked me, that you invited me to come and participate, and hoping that we get some easy questions here. No curve balls here. So I'm ready to dig in whenever you are.
Okay, cool, wonderful, man. So everyone who's listening, this is my brother Noah Tillman-Young. He is the founder of StudyHorse.com. It's a horse training website, and also is a pastor in Floresville.
Stockdale.
Stockdale, as a pastor in Stockdale at a Joyful Heart Community Church. And he has had a life of many successes, many failures, and many more things that he is on his way of doing right now, many more things in the making, many more things in the works. So welcome, Noah, to the Black Gold Podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I have one question for you, though, before we go any further. So, am I the first brother you've asked on here?
Yeah, you're the first one.
So I am the first?
Yep, you're the first.
Oh, great. Yes. I'm going to make sure I rub it in the faces of the others. Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, how did your journey begin with training horses, with becoming a pastor? How did you get started doing that?
Yeah, sure. So, interestingly enough, training horses, teaching people how to work with their horses is really what I focus on, like helping people to work with their horses in a way that's safe so that they don't get hurt. So that, and then also pastoring a church, which are kind of like the two main things that I do right now. Both of them kind of happened by accident. They weren't things that I ever planned on doing, but they just kind of came to be. And so with the horse training, we grew up on a ranch. And well, I'll say you grew up on a ranch, because I came to the ranch, as a young adult, right? And so that was kind of new as far as, working with the horses, and, we had the cows and all of that kind of stuff. And so that was something that was fun, that was exciting. But then when mom and dad started the school and started the school on the ranch, they needed somebody to help with the equine program. They started providing horseback riding lessons, and it was something that I had trained and started working with, and so I had an opportunity to kind of begin there as a young adult. So, and I feel like my experiences working with horses, which were, especially in the early days, were long days, days kind of secluded, or it's just me and the horse or horses that I'm working with. I feel like that's a lot of, too, what kind of informs the way that I pastor and work with people. So I'm kind of getting off trail here, but I never intended on working with horses professionally, never intended being a pastor, but it's one of those things that I kind of fell into. So as far as being a pastor, when I started attending this church in Stockdale, I was just a member, just a regular member. Now, this is a church that Allison, my wife, she grew up in this church. Her family's from this church. In fact, her grandmother pastored this church, and her uncle pastored this church before me. And so when the opportunity arose and I became like part of the leadership in the church, and there was a change as far as the pastoring, and I was asked if I would be willing to step in, It was just kind of one of those natural, organic things that occurred. And yeah, that's the way it started. It never was my intention to ever be a pastor or a horse trainer, but here I am.
Yeah. Wow. That's so you're saying it's all just accidental happenstance, grace of God, like it was God inspired behavior acts that led you to what you are today.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Nothing I ever planned. I'll put it that way. So I guess accidental might not be the right word to use because I know that God has purpose, right, and order and a plan, but it wasn't in my plans, not at all.
Yeah. What was in your plans previous to being a horse trainer and a pastor?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a couple things. I had gone to culinary school, worked in the restaurant industry, had a catering company, worked in different capacities as far as food service. My plan was to open up a chain of restaurants across the country, serving organic, like farm to table type foods where people could get good, healthy meals. That was kind of my long-term plan to open up this big enterprise of healthy restaurants. I remember when I graduated from culinary school, that was around the time that Chipotle had just started. And that was kind of one of the first kind of chains that was emphasizing things like, no growth hormones or this or that, or,
Yeah.
responsibly sourcing, sustainable, things like that. So that was kind of the headspace that I was in. I wanted to do something that was at the time seemed different. Now there's more of that, but at the time seemed different. And so that was kind of where my headspace was.
Oh, cool. So, what was the name you were planning on for your health food and organic restaurant chain?
So in the purposes of protecting potential intellectual property, that's not 100% off the table, and I haven't trademarked it yet, so gonna have to leave that one hanging in the air there.
If you do launch it, let us know and we'll have you back on.
Okay, that sounds good. Sounds good.
In learning about horsemanship and learning about pastoring, who guided you through that process? Who was your mentor?
Sure, yeah. So I've never had like a specific mentor per se. So like just one person that I could just turn to, and that person gave me leadership, direction, support, and all of that. However, I've been blessed to just have just multiple different people in different capacities. And what I found is, so for example, say with pastoring, there's a lot of people who weren't pastors that poured into my life in different ways that have affected the way that I pastor, that have taught me things about my interactions with people, what it means to be a part of community, what it means to show grace in a way that's actually practical and more biblically aligned with like how Jesus walked and lived on this earth. So I haven't had kind of, and it's funny because it's kind of like, I guess, the story of my life. Like I haven't really had like the traditional order of things the way that you would think. But I've had a lot of people, in different capacities. And for mentors, I know a lot of people think of mentors, usually it's somebody older, somebody that's more experienced in a particular industry. But I gotta say, like I've had, friends that are my peers that have had a lot of influence on my life. I've had people who were older that I've interacted with different capacities. And then there's other friends that I have now that are pastors. We talk. So all of that stuff is huge. And then as far as mentorship too, it's pretty cool in this day and age because, with podcasts, with all the different outlets of media, there's so many different ways that you can plug into resources with people who are various, I guess, various experiences and be able to learn, right? And to have them kind of be able to pour into you in that way. So to answer your question, I never had like a specific mentor. Like this is my my church father who did this for me, or this is my training person. But yeah, but God's been really good to me to put multiple people in my life that have helped me out and influenced where I am now. And I will say this, I think that's important, right? Like connecting with various people, not just staying in your group with the people that you know, that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with. It's really important to go out there and connect with different people, because all of God's children have so much to offer, right? And to teach us. So.
Okay. Yeah. So you didn't have any specific mentors. So that means that you must have taken a lot of like learning curves in terms of like training courses and becoming a better pastor. What are some of the things you've had to learn, and some of the failures that you've had in learning to do both horsemanship and pastoring?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things about failures is a lot of it's just perspective, right? So there's like this big thing right now in culture about like, you got to fail, you're going to fail, you're going to fail, you're going to fail. But I've never really looked at it like that. I look at it a little bit differently, because I feel like things are a process. And so one of the things is I always try to look at the bigger picture of things, and I'm not always successful. Sometimes I get trapped right here in my head, like in this moment, what's going on right now. But I try to kind of step back and look at the big picture, right? And I try to look at things kind of like a graph, right? And so if or like a chart, and if we're charting and we're trending downwards and then we come back up, and as long as we're still going up, right, things are okay. We're moving in the right direction. We're having the right trajectory. So I try to look more at trajectory than I do specific targets along the way, because for me, just mentally, that's so tough. Having to feel like I need to hit all those targets, it's a lot, and it's impossible. And I would say that is the biggest thing that I've learned, is that stay away from focusing on those targets, because you're going to miss the mark. You're going to miss the mark. But look at that trajectory. And I feel like the more we get headed towards that trajectory that we're looking for, the easier it becomes to hit the mark. But you also learn how to become a lot more comfortable with realizing, man, I messed up there. Oh, well, gonna learn for next time, try to do better. But I'm not gonna sulk in that and stay there and let that drag me down. So it does require a little bit of mental toughness, but knowing that going into it, knowing that there's a lot of, there's some good ups, but there are a lot of downs, right? And you've got to really focus on the fact that it's all of it, the ups and the down, they all get you there, and it's a part of the process. And there's always learning to be done there. So just like to give you specific examples, like with my church, when we first started, the church was really dying, and literally a lot of old people and small numbers, and numbers were dwindling. And so to me, that was kind of like, oh my gosh, such a small church. Oh my gosh, it's been a few months now. We haven't really grown much. Look at this. Oh, a month turns into a year. What's that? Yeah, oh my goodness. But God was doing something in those times. God was really, I feel like, developing a sense of community between the smaller numbers of us that were there. There were things that we were able to do as small groups that we wouldn't have been able to do as a larger congregation. Really laying down some roots and some foundational things and relationships. And I really feel like, even though certain things that on the outside look like a failure, I wouldn't count it as such. In the moment, it might seem like it, but usually it's been my experience, there's so much more going on.
Okay. So you think of failure as it's almost necessary, or do you think of it as it's a verifier? It tells you that you're heading in the right direction, but you need to tweak it just a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of like the word you use there, verifier. You know, if you're not quote unquote failing, then you're not growing. You're not trying things, right?
Yeah.
Really, you know, uh, if you will, then like failure is just a part of the scientific process, right? Like, you know, if you go through the scientific method, failure is a good thing because every time you fail, it's a success because it tells you something that didn't work. You've got it recorded, right? You know, okay, won't do that again. So my next experiment, my likelihood to fail is going to be that much less likely. That make sense?
Yeah. So you use your failures as a learning experience rather than something that lets you get depressed and just feel weak about what you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. Because, like, especially in today's world, depression is so real. And a lot of people just kind of gloss over it, pretend like it's not real, or say, oh, I'm tough, or that's for weak people, or this or that. But depression is so real, and it kind of can get a hold of you. And the thing about depression is when you are in a depressed state, what it does something really funky to your mind chemically, where it makes you believe that that one moment, that one failure, that one circumstance is like everything. And so it kind of overwhelms all of the loves, the joys, the successes, the great things that have happened. And so by being very intentional, saying, oh, no, it's just a failure. I get a chance to learn. Now I know, you know, that my next try is going to be more likely to be more successful. It changes the way you look at it. It's more of a tool, right? Less of a sentence.
Cool. So, speaking of tools, what have you used over the years to help both to learn and also to grow your horsemanship business as well as your role as a pastor? What tools and resources have you used, or what books have you read in order to learn more about those two things?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That is a good question. So this might surprise you. Maybe not. I haven't read a book since I've been in college. So last book I read was a textbook. I do listen to books on tape though, like audiobooks, Audible, things like that. Just because I'm able to, if you will, kind of multitask, right? I'm able to drive, listen to something. I'm able to be working a horse, listening to something, right? So for me, yeah, you know, really consuming different resources, pretty cool stuff. And I encourage people too, like if you're in a particular industry, don't just limit what you're studying to that industry. So like even as far as being a pastor, you know, like I read so many different, and I say read, whenever I say read, I'm saying like I got my headphones on and I'm listening to something, okay? So like I read so many different types of books from different industries, from fiction to nonfiction to, you know, a book about, I don't know, tennis over here, and another book about a journey in the Appalachia. You know, like there's so many different things that can inform you and you can glean things from and take things away. And I think that's pretty cool, especially just how readily available so many resources are.
Okay. Is there any specific books on tape that you've read recently that have informed you in terms of what you do as a business person in terms of your horse training courses and things that you have in terms of?
Yes, Moses, I am so sorry. I need to pause for a quick second. I'm at the church and somebody is knocking at the door. Give me one quick second and I will be right back, okay? I apologize. One quick second. I apologize for that. Thank you for your understanding.
It's okay, no problem at all.
Okay, so you asked about books that I'm reading right now. Is that what you're asking?
Anything that you've read recently to inform your work as a both a pastor and also as a horse trainer or slash a businessman?
Sure, absolutely. There are. Let me pull up my Audible here. Let me tell you what's in queue here because there's a couple of them I'm working on. There's one called Unseen Realm that last few months that I've read, and that's actually a book about kind of unconventional thinking about like the Christian faith and history from a very Christ perspective, but also very historical as well. The perspective of say like the ancient Israelites and like what different things meant in the Bible in the context of that time and their culture. Really cool book, really cool book. Really neat. Another book that I just finished is The Sticking Point by Jay Abraham. Are you familiar with Jay Abraham?
Yeah, I think I've read some of his works before.
Okay. Yeah, he is awesome. And you know, what's really interesting about The Sticking Point is it's just one of those books where the knowledge applies to so many different facets of life, right? It's pretty incredible. That would probably like as far as a business book, I think that's one of the better ones I've read in a long time. And you can tell like different people, the way Jay explains things, you can tell it's the guy that's been in the. I mean, obviously he has a lot of credentials, but he's been in the trenches. He knows what he's talking about. He knows how to apply different things, and he has you think in a little bit more of a critical way, different than the conventional thinking that people would have you do. So those are a couple of the books that I'm working on.
Oh, cool. Those are two really interesting books. So the first one you'd say, The Unseen Realm, that you'd use that in terms of your walk as a pastor, and the second one's The Sticking Point you'd use as your walk as a horse businessman.
So not necessarily, just because you know I really do. I believe that you. Like there's a scripture in the Bible that says, if nobody declares God's name, even the rocks will cry out to him, right?
Yeah.
And I really feel like you can glean, like God can speak to you through anything, right? So like even reading The Sticking Point, and I don't even know what Jay Abraham's faith is, I'm not sure. But even reading that, there are things where God talks to me, it's like, hey, you thought about this, think about that, or how has that informed the way you're pastoring your church or your life, or how you're dealing with your kids, things like that. And so I feel like when you're looking for God, right, you're going to find him, right? Same thing when you're looking to improve yourself, when you're looking to be a better business person, when you're looking to be a better, just socially aware, responsible person that's contributing member of society and your community in a meaningful and impactful way. You can find those things reading a business book or a quote unquote religious book or reading the New York Times. I honestly believe that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, speaking of the times, how has the current pandemic affected you and your business, your church? How has that affected your lifestyle?
Absolutely. So it's affected everything, just like everybody else, right? So as far as church, we closed down for a long time. We recently kind of did like a soft reopening, very limited amounts of people, lots of space, lots of protocol. So there's that. As far as my business, definitely affected my business. Definitely been a tough time for the business. We're adapting, right? Trying to be resilient. But just like a lot of other businesses and companies, has hit us hard. So having an effect on income and finances and planning. So what does that mean? Just like everything else, it's not, you look at these difficult times and it's easy to be like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Why do I have to be going through this time in history? And whatever, I'm just grateful for the fact that I woke up this morning and I opened my eyes and I could see, the beauty of his splendor, right? That I drew another breath. So putting things in perspective there, because it's a lot of times as an entrepreneur, as having several different businesses, it's really easy to, well, if this business is doing successful, then everything's okay. But when things are going really bad, it's a terrible day, I feel awful, blah, blah, blah. So it's been difficult. It's been a challenge, but it's also been an opportunity to learn, to adjust, to do things differently, to slow certain things down. So as much as I wish that we weren't in this pandemic, I can say that it's been a period of growth, but it certainly has not been without some pretty tough challenges.
Okay.
And I want to say one more thing too. Going back to The Sticking Point, that book by Jay Abrams, he wrote that book, I think, during the 2008 recession, or I think that's when it was published. And one of the things that he talks about in that book actually is about how tough times, recessions, depressions, how it's really a lot about perspective, how do you dig in and continue to be productive in spite of the circumstances around you, which to me, it's a good business lesson. That's been a really good life lesson as well, because a lot of circumstances going on, right? Especially in the Black community with social justice and, police brutality and the lack of justice for these types of encounters that are happening on a daily basis. That's also mentally tough as well, right? And so there's kind of that going on. And in spite of everything that's going on, how do you overcome? How do you keep moving forward and make progress?
Okay, well, that's really inspiring. The idea of just counting your blessings every single day. You are grateful that the fact that you have another day to live your life. If you had a message to spread worldwide to aspiring Black entrepreneurs, what would that message be?
So pretty simple. That message would be to love your neighbor as yourself. Like that would be it. Let me go back, because the first is love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And this wouldn't be my message just to aspiring Black entrepreneurs, but this same message I would give to everybody. And it's going to apply to you the way that, the Holy Spirit convicts you, right? So love God, that's most important, but love each other. And that's really huge. And that's a challenge right now, because I find that in this world, especially in our country, it's so politically divided right now. There's so many different tensions, this, that, whatever. It's a challenge to genuinely love your neighbor as yourself. Doesn't matter what side of the political divide you're on. And so I think it's really important that over everything else, over your cultural pride, over your propensity to want to better yourself and be the best entrepreneur that you can so you can provide for your family and keep them healthy and strong, and then all those things, over any of that stuff, the most important thing is loving God and loving each other. And I honestly believe that if we can do those two things, that it really gives us the opportunity to enjoy our lives to the fullest, regardless of the circumstance or all the stuff that we accumulate and have.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing in your view of everything being. I don't know. There's always hope around the corner, for sure. There's always definitely going to be hope around the corner in terms of the suffering and the pain that's happening right now, the the injustice, as you said, that's happened recently with Breonna Taylor and everything that's happening with Jacob Blake and everything that's just messed up right now in our society. There's always definitely we need to make sure that we always have hope to lean on and to look forward to, and make sure that we put our trust in God and in Jesus rather than in in the system that's in an unjust system, but that we should rally together our hopes and our wishes and our prayers together in terms of something better than what it is right now.
100%. Yeah. And to kind of piggyback off of that, you're right. Like, hope is so important. Mentally, it's so tough right now, especially for me particularly. I live in a very white, very conservative. People are very aggressive towards racial equality. People are, living with their heads in the sand, where it doesn't exist, or it's not that big of a deal. Those types of things, and so it's a challenge. It really is. Uh, and I, as much as all that kind of stuff, it seems tough. It might get you upset, might get you in your feelings, whatever the case might be. I'm always, I always struggle with this balance of coming back down to earth and being like, okay, things are tough, but things have gotten better. Okay, there's still a lot more work to do, but things have gotten better. Sure, they're executing us in the streets, but at least they're not hanging us from trees and burning us. So and there's always there's that, but then I also look at the fact that I am not hanging on a cross either, and there was a lot of injustice that was done to our Lord and Savior. So, like, we're in good, you're in good company. You really are. And so a lot of times when people have injustices served to them, yes, they suck, they're terrible, but it's a reality that we deal with. It's a part of the life that we live. And our Lord and Savior, he endured some of the worst, worst, right? And so keeping that in perspective, gives me hope, because it lets me know that he endured that so that we're able to transcend where we are and walk in the freedom and the love and the grace and the mercy that he afforded us in spite of the way that he was treated.
Yeah. So to end on a brighter note, you recently have released a safer horse course that you have been working on over the summer. Can you tell our listeners more about that?
Yeah, so that's a project with my company, Steady Horse, where we provide horse educational materials, and really the whole focus is on teaching people to be safer with their horses. So it's a course that we release to show people specifically things that they can do with their horse in order to make sure that their horse is safer before they climb on and start riding. And so it's been a neat project. Just kind of wrapped that up a few weeks ago and launched it last week. And so that's kind of the main thing with Steady Horse that's going right now, so that people can get their hands on super affordable but quality horse resources that will help them be safer with their horses.
Okay. So how has learning about horses and the way that because I remember it was you, Mom, and we went out to get a rescue donkey, and like I remember Mom was really like stunned and surprised at the way that you were able to calm her down and get her into the trip, and it didn't take as long as the owner thought that it would take. And the idea of using that technique, does that technique apply also to to humans? Because in your course, you talk about how you want to always de-escalate things in terms of the way that you breathe, your tonality of your voice, and everything that you do, your movements. You want to make sure that the horse responds to what you are doing, rather than you having to always be up in your guard and going against the horse's wishes. How does your training that you do for Study Horse, how can it be applied for other avenues, other different types of um, interests, other things like that?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, because like I feel like right now it's really it's common to just be responsive to stuff, right? Be responsive to stimulus or this or that. Um, where it's so much more important, I feel, to be proactive, right? And so that's the thing with our horses, and I feel like God teaches us a lot through horses, through animals, through different circumstances in general, especially with nature and animals. And so by taking your time, by being steady, by not going in there and seeing a problem, but seeing an opportunity, it allows you to kind of frame now the context with which you're going to deal with the circumstance. And so you can either be combative and escalate things, and things usually go sideways. That's when people get hurt. Or you can come in with looking for understanding, looking to develop more clarity, right? So that each of you has more certainty as to where things are going, what's going to happen next. Doesn't mean that things are always going to go where you anticipate, but at least you're getting there with some clarity and making some more advancements in your understanding of each other. And I feel like, as far as safety, that's definitely much better. But also as far as having impacts that's more meaningful. And that applies to life, right? Like if you go in there to just bump heads and tear each other up, things are going to continue to be that way. Somebody might end up on top, someone might end up on the bottom. This person might feel good for a fleeting moment. But if you go in there in order to really just to embrace each other, to really get a sense of understanding, to get some clarity of where each other's coming from, that's where meaningful growth can actually happen. So 100%, the things that I learned and experienced with my horses, and the people that I work with horses definitely have a bearing, really inform my interactions on so many other different levels.
Yeah, so like parenting and also in your marriage, you found that those same principles of de-escalation and thoughtfulness apply, correct?
Yeah. De-escalation. Clarity is a huge one. Like clarity and communication. That's like 9 out of 10 relationships, right? In general, whether it's with your children, your spouse, your employer, whatever, employees, providing that clarity and really trying to get to that clarity, trying to get to that understanding. It's not about me pointing the finger or saying, why did you do this? Or how come you always this, or blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, what happened that, this was even an issue to begin with, or explain to me your thinking, or, what does this mean? Because I want to understand. And you see that different approach allows an opportunity for meaningful dialogue, right? Instead of just, a battle for who's right or a battle for, having the last word, whatever the case might be.
Well, oh gosh, went over time a little bit. It's all good. It's all good. Um, so thank you very much, Noah, for agreeing and also being on the podcast, and really appreciate it, brother.
Oh man, love you so much. Always my pleasure to do anything with you, Moses. And I'm glad that I'm so humbly glad that I'm the first sibling to be on here. So love you, man.
Love you too, bro. Goodbye. Take care.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.